Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Science Radio. My name is Nada, and I'm joined with my host Jesse, and we are honoured to be in the company of Sisi Toro today, who has actually been with us before on the podcast. So, welcome back, Sisi.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, we recently had an issue in the January-February issue of Science of the Times that you wrote for us, and it was titled "Pregnancy Debunking the Ticking Clock." And this is a topic that I think consumes the minds of probably most young women, some men as well. And I think it's a topic that's not only highly stressed about and highly talked about, but yeah, it's something that there's a lot of confusion about, and it's something that you're sort of riding against the grain with. And so I'm really interested to see just what you think about it and your thoughts and what you've kind of read into. So I guess considering that this is a topic that people are very confused about, there's a lot of different opinions and feelings. What makes you, I guess, credible in talking about this? Why this hits home for you and why yours is an opinion which we should consider?
Sure, yeah. I'm not just someone who randomly decided to start writing on controversial medical scientific topics for no reason. I mean, I do have an evidence-based background. So I actually did a degree in molecular biology and genetics, which is all evidence-based, basically. It taught me a lot of skills in analyzing data and being able to understand research. And then I went into a dental degree, which also the program I was in, we studied with the medical students as well. So it was basically a medical degree, and I completed the theory component, but I didn't do the clinical. I ended up switching and going into education to be a teacher. So I do have an understanding of physiology, anatomy, the body. I definitely don't have any clinical experience, and I never claim to have anything like that. But I love to research. I am very proud to be a geek and always happy to read, the latest medical studies. And actually, I do check PubMed, which is a medical database. I check it pretty regularly, probably a couple of times a month to see if there's anything interesting out. So, some people read novels, I read medical studies. So that's basically what I love. And I guess this topic in particular, I'm 30, I'm almost 37. I'll be 37 in April. And I've only been married for a couple of years. But during that time, people have consistently told us that we need to hurry up and have children. And even before we got married, people were consistently telling us that we needed to hurry up and get married so that we could have children because there's such, there's so much hype around the ticking biological clock. And as someone who my mother actually gave birth to my brother at 41 years old, and he was a happy, healthy baby. And for me, seeing that firsthand as a child, I was 10 at the time. I really, in my mind, never thought that women couldn't have children in their late 30s and 40s because I saw my mother do it, and it really wasn't until I reached this age that I started to realize, wow, this is a real fear that women have. And I kind of just want to debunk that fear because I don't think anybody should make fear-based decisions, especially big life decisions based on fear. So that's why I'm really passionate about this topic.
This definitely hits home for me as well, Cece. I mean, I got married youngish. I was 23. My wife was 24 at the time. So we've been married for coming up on 8 years now. And she's pregnant with our first child. And it was quite funny when we announced it to our family. They were genuinely surprised because they had just figured that we just waited so long that it was just never going to happen. They were like, "Man, we we just kind of gave up on you. Like we just thought, oh yeah, you've got a dog. That's it. You'll just be like dog people, you know." Thanks, sister. um, but it was a genuine worry for us, especially for my wife. You know, when she hit 30, just a few years ago, it was kind of this impending sense of doom that, oh no, I've hit 30, 35 is not too far away. I'm now considered a geriatric mother, which she just loved to say all the time. And it just always it just really hung over her. And, praise the Lord, she's by the time you listen to this podcast, she may have given birth, but maybe not. But everything has been really, really normal so far, and that's against everything that we thought was going to happen. She was thinking, I'm going to be a geriatric mother, I'm going to have all these complications, it's going to be terrible. And it seems that she's not alone. I know, Zanita, you mentioned before we started recording that you had actually asked a few of your friends about their opinions, and the responses surprised you, right?
Yeah, I actually, in preparation for this conversation, posted on my Instagram just that I was doing this podcast interview and what were people's thoughts about the whole ticking clock thing. Like, were they freaking out? Do they think about it often? And I got responses from males and from females. I got responses from people in their young 20s, some who were freaking out, some who were chilled. I got responses from people who were married and who were freaking out, people who were single and were saying, like, of course, like, I think about it all the time. Like, it plays into my decisions on dating, and like it plays into my, like, yeah, like I might not be completely happy with a guy, but do I have time to start all over? And so it was just interesting. It seemed like people from every different, like, I guess, background or demographic or whatever walk they are in their life, they're all like kind of thinking about it and semi freaking out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just really interesting, no matter which pool you're in, unless you're in the pool of I've had kids and I'm married and I'm further on.
Right.
You're kind of beyond that. But the rest of them, it's, yeah, they're all thinking about it essentially,
Yeah.
which I found just really interesting. But I guess we're looking at like debunking the ticking clocks and the myths around that. Without going too far into them, what are some of those like myths that we commonly fear?
I think, the most common one that we as women are really frequently told, or at least that society pushes, is that our fertility just drops completely when we turn 35. Like once you hit that magical 35, you basically have no fertility anymore. And another thing that we're told all the time, and science has largely supported this until more recently, is that we're going to run out of good enough eggs, and that's one of the major reasons why our fertility is dropping. But yeah, these are basically this myth that our biological clock is chronological, which I think is just, it's a really it's a pushed myth, and I can understand why so many people believe it, because even doctors will often perpetuate this myth. But the evidence is just showing that this really is a myth, that it's really not to do with how far along we are in our age, but it's really to do with a lot of other lifestyle factors, our health status in general. So yeah, I'm looking forward to debunking those myths.
Let's talk about eggs, because that's something that you mentioned, and I know a lot of women are very concerned about that their eggs are going to wither up and die, and it's going to be game over for insemination. So uh, what what's the deal? What's the deal, Cece, with your eggs and your ovary and all that sort of stuff? I I want to pretend like I know what I'm talking about because I've been going through the last sort of 9 months of scans and obstetrician appointments, but I'm still,
Yeah.
even now, I'm lost.
Yeah. We've always thought, and even when I was studying medicine, we were taught as well that when you're born, as a female, you have all the eggs that you're ever going to have. That's basically what the popular opinion. But it's really interesting that more recent animal research is showing. So there was a study in 2004. So Harvard Medical School actually noticed this phenomenon where adult female mammals can actually have new eggs appear in their ovaries. And they noticed it in mice. And it was such a polarizing study. I didn't read it at the time, but as I was looking back over news articles and things like that, I was realizing, wow, when this came out at the time, the articles were just so divided. Some were calling the research stupid, basically. And some were like, wow, this is incredible. We've never really seen this kind of thing. But either way, it really inspired more research. So they did a similar study in 2013 on prosimian primates, and they actually saw that the adult females in this species, they could produce new eggs in their adult life. And then, you might think, okay, but these are animals. So then what happened was then in 2016, they were doing a trial for a chemo drug called, I only know the abbreviation, it's ABVD. But during that trial, they accidentally found that humans actually have that same ability to develop new eggs. And, it really shouldn't come as a shock, because especially for us who worship God, and, we understand that our God is the God of second chances. He's not limited by our human kind of ideas. The fact that he would actually create us in a way that would have this ability, especially when other mammals have this ability, and we can see this ability in other mammals. We should really start to rethink this idea that's always perpetuated, that females are born with it's a limited pool of eggs, it's set to run out. And that idea just is continually being taught to girls, women, everywhere. We know that men keep producing new sperm. So, it actually makes sense that women should be able to keep producing new eggs.
I guess on the animal studies that show that, like, it was possible for them to create new eggs, I'm wondering if, like, those animals, were they under certain, like, conditions? Like, were all animals creating new eggs, or was it just certain animals who were put on a, like, whatever diet? Or
that's a great point. So, something that they really found, I guess I should bring in the other very popular myth that to do with eggs, is that a lot of people think that your eggs will age and they decrease in quality as you get older. And there's a scientist, Dr. Ray Peat, and he wrote a really good book on it's basically on female hormones in general. It goes all the way from menstruation all the way through to menopause. And he actually mentions a lot of different experiments that show that old animals actually keep producing eggs even after they've become supposedly infertile. So how they found that was, if they took one of the eggs from like an old infertile animal and they fertilized and transplanted it into a young animal, the egg would actually still implant itself and grow into a healthy offspring, which is like phenomenal. It basically shows that the egg is still in good condition. It's not the eggs that are aging and causing infertility. It's we always think that infertility is caused by basically us either running out of eggs or our eggs aging. But actually, and I'm glad you asked that question, Zanita, about environmental things, and it's caused by stress, because stress causes the environment of the mother's uterus basically to be it's just not suitable for implantation and development of new life. So when we think about, I mean, stress, you're probably wondering, like, okay, well, what exactly is stress? Because stress can come in so many different forms, and it's basically any kind of challenge that your body is facing, and it doesn't have the resources to deal with it. So the main hormone in stress is cortisol. And if cortisol isn't brought down in some way, it drives an increase in estrogen, which is one of our main female hormones. And estrogen actually directly lowers your thyroid function. And when you have low thyroid function, that basically causes you to lose an excessive amount of carbon dioxide. So I'm trying to put it in layman's terms, but it's a scientific phenomenon called the Bohr effect. And basically it shows that if you don't have enough carbon dioxide in the body, your cells can't use oxygen. So basically, to sum it all up, high stress causes hypoxia, which is low oxygen in the cells. So what Dr. Pete was seeing and observing was that these old animals they didn't have enough oxygen in their uterus to keep the embryo alive when it would normally be ready for implantation. So that's why, the infertile older animal, it couldn't necessarily naturally fertilize and develop this new life and implant it. But when you put that egg into a younger animal, it was able to do that. So what's really interesting is when he saw that when you give estrogen to young animals, it actually caused like a similar kind of lack of oxygen in the uterus, and it prevents implantation of the embryo. So it's nothing to do with the animal's age. It's nothing to do with our age. Aging, I guess, or loss of fertility, basically. It's really driven by excessive stress, excessive estrogen. It's not just how much time has passed in your life. So, this research really, really is bringing home the fact that chronological time, it doesn't necessarily define your biological age. Like, I'm 37 right now, but I can tell you I am 100% healthier now than I was at 21 when I had the worst lifestyle. My hormones were completely out of whack. I was in and out of hospital. I guarantee you that I wasn't as healthy then as I am now.
I'm just wondering. I mean, I haven't read the book myself. Dr. Ray Pete's study on estrogen and aging, has that data been reproduced in humans, or has that research not gotten further than animals at this stage? Do you know?
I don't think he actually performed the studies himself. I think he was actually summarizing other research that that others had done. I know one of the studies was to do with was like maternal aging in the rabbit, and it was not done by him. It was by, I think, Mora and Foote were the authors. But so I don't think he ever did the research himself. He was basically just making the point based on this other research. But yeah, I'm not sure that there is human research to kind of confirm that it's the same case in humans.
I guess the follow-up question, we can kind of look at the age thing and be like, oh, we don't need to stress as much because age isn't the determining factor. But the follow-up question, I suppose, is, well, as we age, like you were talking about the quality of our eggs, are we more prone to higher risk pregnancies and complications? Like, what is the consideration there?
That's a great question, Zanita. I would say that not everyone ages at the same rate, but because everyone does age, we're all getting older, whether we like to admit it or not. We definitely are all getting older. And those who are maintaining, a lifestyle that's not ideal, of course, their eggs are not going to be as good when they're older as they are when they're younger. There's no way that I would ever say that someone whose lifestyle is subpar is going to be totally okay at 35, 40, 45 to have a kid. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I'm more saying that instead of focusing on your age, you want to focus on making your environment, making the conditions in your environment favorable so that you're not adding stresses to your body that are going to make you age faster than if you didn't. But you're right. There definitely is more risk as you age. But the reason there's more risk is because women who are enduring, and not just women, but it's, for men as well. The sperm accounts for 50% of the DNA. So if a couple are living a subpar lifestyle and they want to have children, it would be foolish to think that you're not going to put yourself at risk waiting longer and longer. But at the same time, you can also make your conditions more favorable. And in many ways, I guess, I don't like to use the word reverse, but in some ways it's almost like a reversal of infertility in that sense. If you're actually making your conditions more favorable than they were before, then I mean you are more fertile, you know.
I do find it's interesting. You mentioned in the article a lady by the name of Dawn Brooke who had a
Mhm.
baby at the age of 59,
That's right.
which is pretty incredible. And I googled her name in preparation for this interview, and I wasn't prepared for the actual floodgate of not just her story, but many of the other stories. I found somebody who had a baby at the age of 55,
Yep.
62,
Yep.
um, 64. And I did notice actually one common thread that only occurred to me now was that a lot of these folks who had kids at this age, they're in a much different place in life that people who are younger tend to be. They're at the end of
Mhm.
their career. They have
Mhm.
probably they're more financially stable, a more stable living environment. And
Yep.
so for them, a lot of these couples that I saw, their focus was on slowing down and really focusing on having the child. And I didn't even put it together until you were just saying that sort of stuff. I don't know if I'm just drawing conclusions out of nothing or if there's something really to that.
There absolutely is. I mean, because even if you completely are not looking at fertility and just looking at aging in general, it's 100%. The speed at which you age is 100% determined by your environmental conditions. And that can be so many things. It's, you know, your diet, nutrition. It can be your relationships and the quality of your relationships. How stressed are you psychologically, you know, emotionally? Is your environment toxic? Are you exposed to mold, chemicals? How well do you sleep? You know, there are so many factors that can really either contribute to good health or can take away from your health. And when we then consider fertility, I mean, what you're saying is spot on because my husband and I were joking that a lot of our friends who get pregnant really quickly, a lot of them are actually not even working full time. You know, they don't necessarily have the stresses of a full-time job. Like you said, they might be focusing on something else. How many times have you heard? I know for me personally, I've had so many friends find out they're pregnant and then they're like, I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize you were trying. And they're like, we weren't, you know, we weren't even thinking about it. And then sometimes you have couples, and my heart goes out to these couples who are trying month after month. But there's actually a lot of psychological stress that comes with that, you know. So definitely there is that correlation, like you're saying, between these couples who are having children at an older age and they're very settled and they don't necessarily have the stresses that you know you might have when you're younger and you're trying to establish a life for yourself. You know, maybe you're trying to work towards buying a home. There are financial stresses, you know, all of those kinds of things. So yeah, definitely can can be related for sure.
Yeah, you often hear the stories of people who are trying to have children. They're trying and they're stressing about it and it's not happening, and then as soon as they decide to, like, take a break and step back because it's causing them so many emotions, that's
Yes.
when it happens.
Yeah, I'm definitely not, you know, I don't want to invalidate the experience of couples
Oh,
who are going through that infertility and that horrible cycle of, oh, it's just another month of, you know, I have many friends who have gone through that, and it's devastating, and I my heart really
mm.
does go out to them. But at the same time, I totally agree, Zanita. I mean, I think we all know at least a handful of people who can say that that was their experience, you know, that, oh, we just decided to take a break and then all of a sudden we were pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like taking the pressure off just suddenly makes it the conditions right sort of thing.
Yeah.
Zanita, I'm not sure. I should have asked you beforehand, but are any of those questions or thoughts that you got on Instagram, like, are there any there that you could like just read or like ask Sisi or like read to Sisi for her to respond to? Are there any specifics? Like we won't give people's names or anything like that, but are there any good there that are good for that?
Yes, there definitely was. Let me see. I guess, well, one of the questions was there seems to be a lot of different opinions on this. And you kind of touched on this already, but one person asked, what are some practical things that women can do to balance their hormones and to be healthy in preparation to conceive and look after themselves? We hear a lot of women talk about raw milk and bone broth, but it all seems very overwhelming. What are some specific things that we can do that will really help us?
Yeah, raw milk and bone broth are all the rage these days. I personally am 100% plant-based, and so I I personally wouldn't recommend those things. I think more importantly than choosing specific foods is to always have balance, and actually even more importantly is actually to make sure you're eating enough, because a lot of women are under eating these days because for whatever reason they're busy, they're just trying to grab a bite every so often, and that can really stress out the body. So eating enough of really nutritious, nutritionally dense foods, and because once you're eating a wide range of foods and you're also eating enough of those foods, one, your body doesn't feel stressed because under eating can lead to stress on the body. And two, if you are naturally eating a wide variety, especially of plant foods, you're getting all the minerals and all the nutrition that you need. So I don't necessarily like to focus on specific things. I think it's more important to have balance and not be like, oh, I need to eat a lot of this or a lot of this, or balancing, also limiting your processed foods, because processed foods are not really doing anything for you except giving you extra calories. So it's not really beneficial to the body at all for you to have processed foods, and actually your body has to work hard to eliminate the nasties that are often in processed foods. So just eating mineral rich, nutritionally dense foods that are going to fuel you. Also just reducing your exposure to toxins in your environment. So whether that be really kind of more dangerous things like mold and actual chemical exposure, to things even in your body products, your cleaning products, trying to choose cleaner options. And it doesn't mean you have to go out and throw out everything that you have that looks toxic currently. It's more a matter of the next time you go and buy something, check the ingredients list and see if you can find something a little cleaner. I don't think anybody has to go crazy with feeling like my entire life has to just change, because I think that can actually really stress people out and make it feel like unattainable to do that. I think the most important thing in preparing yourself for pregnancy and really boosting your fertility is actually your mental and emotional health. That is so crucial. I mean, we've talked already about how stress can play such a big role. Stress, I've seen so many clickbait kind of articles that say things like stress is the new smoking. And yes, they're very clickbaity, but actually there's a lot of data to suggest that stress really is very, very dangerous, maybe as dangerous as smoking in terms of the detrimental effect it can have on your health. And then I would say the other thing, which we talked about the last podcast, is getting sunlight. It's so incredible for your body to get enough sunlight. We were designed to be in the sun. And so being in the sun activates so many physiological, biological processes in your body that are really crucial to fertility. One of the main ones is really regulating your circadian rhythm so you can sleep well. So, when you sleep, you get good rest and restorative hormones that flood your body while you're sleeping. So I don't necessarily like to give like too many specific steps, because I find that people can get caught up in specifics and then feel like if I'm not doing this, then I'm not going to be fertile enough.
Mm.
But really, you want to change your habits in a way that's sustainable, because if you can't keep it up, you might you might do all the steps it takes to get there, but then if you can't maintain it throughout your pregnancy, you're going to go back to habits that are not great. Whereas if you can find little things that are sustainable and just maintain them throughout your pregnancy, it's going to be a lot easier for you, less stressful. That's what I would say, probably.
Yeah, we don't want people to be stressed about not
Oh,
being stressed.
no, like you want to have fun with it.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
happy. You want to be happy in your marriage. You want to be laughing about things. You want to have joy. Like, imagine when your baby is created and conceived in that kind of environment, and the difference that makes to a baby that's conceived in an environment that's like, I just really need to get pregnant and I'm really stressed about this. Like, there's a huge difference. So you want to set yourself up to have a joyful pregnancy, and then a joyful life with your baby.
Yeah, I think what this article and this conversation does is a great job at reducing the amount that we need to stress. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen or heard of the stress performance curve. It's basically a graph that shows that there's like a level of optimal stress that makes us like productive and
Right.
motivated. But I guess the interesting thing is when I look at like the messages that I received on Instagram about this conversation, or when I just like talk to my friends, it seems like they're on that high end of the scale where they're overwhelmed and they're anxious and they're panicking and they are just like making poor decisions because they're so stressed about it. And at that level, productivity actually like decreases. And I think what we don't want this podcast and article to do is to make people like complacent or passive and to just sit back and not consider their future and not think about things.
Right.
Because that would, it would be a shame for people to take that mindset and completely miss out. But I think there is a balance, like what you're kind of saying is like to look after your environment and to get healthy and to focus on things that we can sustain, I guess, over time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately, for any health habits, it's really important when you're establishing health habits that you always choose things that are going to be sustainable, because there actually no point in you establishing a habit that you can't maintain because it shouldn't be something that you're just doing temporarily. That's why I don't necessarily like the word diet when people say, "Oh, can you recommend a certain diet to me?" I'm always like, well, I don't really like to do that because, it needs to be like what works for me or what works for one person might not be sustainable for you. So, like I like to give more general recommendations that people can kind of work towards and implement, as opposed to specific, like this is the best thing, this is the best thing. Because I think having such a cutthroat approach can make it really unattainable for a lot of people. People will go, I can't do that, therefore I can't get healthy, which is just actually not the case. Everyone can take little steps that will help them to improve their health, but it's really identifying what are those steps that you're going to be able to maintain, and choose one and focus on it for a couple of weeks. And then when you feel like, okay, I have the hang of this, I'm incorporating more plant-rich foods into my diet, and I'm incorporating a bit more variety, and I'm starting to feel pretty good about it, developing a routine with my meal prep, I think I'm ready to start, implementing more of a regular exercise routine, as opposed to, okay, I need to get my diet right, exercise, make sure I'm drinking all the right water, make sure I get this amount of sunlight. Like, if you're trying to do it all at once, it can just really seem overwhelming. So this podcast is not to say don't do anything, but also don't do everything without really considering whether you can sustain and maintain it.
Were there any others there, Zanita? I just have one more question, but if there was some other questions or things that we could respond to, we'll do that.
Yeah, I guess I got another message from a girl who she just turned 33, and she said she kind of went from the mindset of, "Oh, it's okay, like, it'll happen in the right timing," to when she turned 33, she was like, "I've gotta make this happen," and she's all of a sudden making demands on relationships, like, "You've gotta go, I need someone who wants this right now," and I think that's probably the concerning thing I've seen in some of these messages and in some of just like my friendship circles, is how this stress impacts our relationship decisions, in the sense of people are like settling more because they think if they're not married by like 30 or 32 or 33, like it's not going to happen. And so they've just got to like stick with who they're with, um, which is a huge stress. And so I guess like you mentioned, Cece, that you got married at a later age. Like, how did you kind of, well, I guess, trust that process, or like how did you hold that patience? Were you also freaking out and thinking you had to find someone, or like
I-
how did you deal with your stress in that
you
that
know,
period?
I feel terrible because I actually, I can definitely sympathize with women who have this kind of fear, but to be honest, I haven't personally experienced it myself. I don't know if you remember, Xenia, but back when we were living in the same area, I was like, I was so stoked to be single. Like I was single for, I would say like I think about 6 years in my 20s, and very happily single. And for me, I guess the biggest thing was I just wanted to be, spending as much time as I could with God and doing ministry, and just and being given so many opportunities to serve and to minister. I just was eating it up. And so to me, I was never really thinking like, oh no, at what point am I, am I going to need to start focusing on getting into a relationship? I actually, for many, many years, thought, oh, I think I would be happy being single for the rest of my life. I didn't even consider motherhood. So I wasn't really ever in that mindset. I started dating my husband. How old was I? I was about was in, almost 31 when my husband and I started dating. And we had so many, as soon as we started dating, like literally, as soon as we started dating, all the aunties and uncles at church were kind of like, okay, time to get married. She's 31. You know,
Oh my
you guys
goodness.
gotta hurry up. And to me, I was like, let's just get to know each other. Like we were both working full time, very, very busy. But I really loved that we were doing ministry together. And so I would have an opportunity to observe him in different situations. He had an opportunity to observe me. And for us, it was really, again, we just wanted to make sure that God was in the center of our relationship. And it never really entered my mind like, oh, I need to hurry up and get married to this man so that we can have children. For me, something that I have found to be true throughout my whole life, even when I didn't know God, but I can look back and see his hand in my life, is that God's timing is perfect. It's so, so perfect. And sometimes we have this desire to rush things. And often it's not for our best to rush things. God knows exactly when is the best timing for us. And I think having that always in the back of my mind it was just such assurance for me. I never really needed to wonder like, oh no. And then of course having the own experience of having my mother have a son at 41, I was like, oh, I'm God can do. I mean, women in the Bible were having kids when they were way past their fertile, when most women these days would be dead already. So I guess for me, I'm like, we serve the most wonderful God, and if it's His plan for me to be a mother, He'll make it happen. I don't ever need to worry. I don't ever need to stress about it. And I would love to apply this kind of, I guess, lack of stress to other areas of my life that I do sometimes stress about. But in this particular area, I honestly have not ever stressed, because to me, I just know that um, if that is God's plan, it's not going to be like oh no, when is it going to happen kind of thing. It's going to happen. And as long as I'm doing everything that I'm aware of, that God has convicted me of, to prepare and to set myself up for that, he's going to do the rest. I mean, he's been doing it for thousands of years. So I can trust that he's gonna do it in my life and my husband's life as well. So yeah, so that's, I think, the biggest thing for me, just to trust that God's timing is perfect and his plan is perfect. Something that I thought I should mention as well, because there are also studies that actually show there are health benefits for women in particular to have children younger as well. There are some protective things, and it's not like really super conclusive research, but there's enough research to show that there are some benefits to having children younger, and that there can be, for some women, dangers to having children later, in terms of like developing cancers and different things, like specifically reproductive cancers. But at the same time, I wouldn't say again that that should be a reason for anyone to rush into a decision or make a decision again based on fear. It's more to encourage women, if you're at that stage of life where you're ready and you're thinking about having a child and you're younger, I'm definitely not discouraging that either. It's like I said, God's timing is perfect. So that might be suitable for you and where you're at in your life.
Yeah, I guess it's a good point. I think ideally most women would want to have them younger, but that's not always in their control. So it's like, so to reduce the stress that you're going through because you didn't have them or couldn't have them younger, here's what you could do. I think the only other thing we didn't touch on that we said we thought we would touch on, or maybe we did, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I guess the general time people start freaking out is around like 25. Like that's when they think, or around 35 is when they think that we just drastically drop. It's like a roller coaster drop where we lose our eggs. Can you just speak on, like, I guess some statistics of like what actually does the decline look like? Like, is it as drastic as we think it is, or is it more of like a slow decline?
Yeah, I don't have the data off the top of my head, but when you just look at birth rates and, women who are still having children, it's actually really interesting that for our generation, women have had children later. And I think that's more because of maybe career choices, kind of a different mindset. But the fact that women are having children later kind of tells us that, our eggs are not just completely disappearing at a later age. If women are still able to have those children, then they've got to be eggs there in order to do that. Yeah, like I said, I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but it's definitely not as drastic as people kind of imagine it to be. Like, once you've reached 35, that's it. You're out. There's no way. I mean, Jesse gave so many examples of women who are having children into their 60s. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen for everyone. I definitely would say that is the minority. But the fact that it can happen shows you that your eggs are not just disappearing.
I think that potentially the risk in this whole discussion is assuming that what we're talking about is fertility in a vacuum, like that every woman is going to experience the exact same conditions, which is obviously is not the case. And I think we all kind of intuitively know this, and yet as we talk about fertility in the, I guess, the broader conversation, there is perhaps an assumption that everybody's experience is more or less one to one, which I think, as you've demonstrated, CC, environmental factors, health and lifestyle choices, individual, I guess, body things, whether it be disease or whether it be specific things going on in a woman's body. These are all hugely influential. It's not that everybody has the exact same experience, and so I guess we can't talk about it as if this is a common phenomenon that everybody is supposed to just get in line and go, well, this is how my life's going to be.
Right. And I think that's why, because it's not a one size fits all kind of formula, it is really important to have that trust in God, because God knows every cell in our body. He knows every egg that we have. He knows every egg that's going to end up becoming a child, being fertilized and becoming a baby. God knows everything about us. And so trusting in him and applying his health principles, living by his health principles and trusting in him is actually the best thing we can do for ourselves. And we don't have to feel like we need to do more than that, because in many senses, when we do more than that, it is often in some ways like taking things into our own hands and trying to play God, I guess, trying to just feeling like, oh, I don't know what else to do, therefore I'm going to do X, Y, Z. But, God says, well, I know what to do and I'm doing it in your body right now. So, so really just trusting him, I think is a huge, huge part of fertility.
Well, thank you so much, Sisi. It's been an awesome conversation, and yeah, we've really enjoyed just your different angle of this. I'm sure we will have you back on the podcast on a future topic.
Yes, I would love to join again. Thank you so much for having me.